Prices for food and other agricultural commodities have been soaring recently, hitting new record highs in many cases, with effects that are being felt all over the world in corporate earnings, in rising political tensions in the Middle East, and in the growing fears of global hunger. To discuss these issues, I'm joined by Greg Meyer, who's the FT's commodities reporter based here in New York. So, Greg, what's going on? Why are we seeing all these agricultural commodities soaring in price at the moment?
In corn and soybeans, you've seen tremendous demand as emerging market consumers consume more meat, consume more animal protein. Raising those animals in a more commercial, large-scale way requires animal feed instead of feeding them kitchen scraps. And then in wheat, you saw a major drought last year in the Black Sea, which caused a major supply disruption and a real scramble to obtain supply.
And what about cotton? Cotton's the other thing that's been soaring in price. It hit a new record again today, right?
Cotton has been a remarkable price rally. It's up about, it hit $2 a pound for the first time in history today, a nominal all-time high. It's up 171% in the last year. The main issue there is certainly just very, very strong demand, in particular in China, which is the largest importer of cotton.
How elastic is production? I mean, is it possible, in response to these very high prices we're seeing, that you're going to get a lot more planting and a lot more cotton being grown?
In theory, you would. You would see in the U.S., which again is the largest exporter of cotton, you'd see farmers plowing under their front yards to plant cotton. But the fact is, you've also got very high prices for corn, soybeans, and wheat. And so there's really no room to take acreage away, land away from one crop to add land to another.
So the commodities are all related because they're competing for the same basic resources, i.e. agricultural land and water, and so it's likely they are going to move together. What about policy here? Is policy having any effect? I mean, is there the things that the US government is doing which are helping to encourage this price rise?
In some ways it's having a significant effect, probably foremost in the production of ethanol from corn. The US has tax credits to encourage blending of ethanol into the motor fuel pool, and also mandates to require a certain amount of ethanol to be produced each year. As a result, 40% of the corn crop in the US is now expected to be not turned into food or animal feed, but refined into fuel.
And still going up as well, right? Because there are policies still in place to increase.
The US is producing we've been breaking records on ethanol production for months now.
And so what about the effects of this then? Think perhaps first of all about on the corporate scene. What does it mean for US companies?
You've seen companies like Kraft and PepsiCo complaining or warning about how higher commodity prices are going to affect their bottom lines and affect prices for consumers. And certainly in the case of food, in the CPI numbers today, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, that was the fastest growing or fastest rising element of the food component of the CPI here in the US. And that makes sense because the pigs and the cows that are turning into meat, and the chickens are eating corn and soybeans.
And so, in general then, what is the impact of these rising prices, rising agricultural commodity prices on the US economy?
Well, it certainly is eating into people's disposable income in terms of consumers. But for the farm belt in the US, particularly the Midwest, it's a real boon, and the rural economy is doing quite well. Land values are soaring, and agricultural exports are booming. And in fact, ag exports are a major contributor or a major offset to the US's trade deficit.
What about global impacts? Are we going to see a rise in global hunger, do you think, as a result of these rising prices?
There have already been warnings of a significant rise in global hunger as a result of rising prices. In countries like the US, obviously consumers still spend on average a very small amount of their paycheck on food, and have a fair amount of versatility in terms of reducing their meat consumption if they need to. In poor countries, people are much more dependent on staple grains, where prices have been extraordinarily volatile. Grain prices have been a factor in the unrest we've seen across North Africa and the Middle East. And last month there were reports of significant buying grain tenders from some governments in that region in order to stockpile grain, try to tamp down inflation, and quell the unrest.
And what do you think the outlook's going to be now? These prices, of course, can be very volatile. All commodity prices have a tendency to be volatile, and we saw a big spike in agricultural commodity prices in 2008, which was then reversed very quickly. So presumably it's quite hard to predict where the market's going to go next. But what's your sense of what the trends are?
It is difficult to predict where the market's going to go next. Farmers are very responsive to price signals, and while in the U.S., there's not that much more land they can expand into this year. There is some, and there are some reports. I've been talking to farmers in the U.S. Midwest who have said their neighbors are selling off their cattle, and because cattle prices are also at record highs right now, and plowing under the pasture land to plant soybeans into. And there's certainly unused land in Brazil, for example. You will see increased supplies, but it's unpredictable what the impact on prices will be.
Well, this is certainly one of the most important stories in the world right now, and it's one we'll be following very closely indeed at the FT. Greg Meyer, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed.